those, I think we're going to take these out of order for just a second, would be the Medal of Honor Museum. We're going to have guests here this evening that are going to make that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to steal the mouse here real quick. Just a minute.
Good evening. Board of Regents, Dr. Wallace, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight and share this presentation. We're really excited about it. My name is Steve Wood. What this space can be, what this facility can be, how it can be beneficial not only to NCTC but also to the host city program, which I know Gainesville is so fond of and has done an amazing thing for this community. We talked not only with the NCTC group but also with the host city program group, with Don Pettigrew, with Mayor Moore, several others. We've met with them along the way to talk about what are the needs from their side and what are the needs from the NCT side, and how can we come up with a design that's beneficial for both groups and just makes a major impact not only for this campus but for this community. So what I'd like to do is kind of walk through a couple of slides here I've got up on the screen. Let's see if this will go to the first one. So this is the floor plan. I want to start there kind of where we are with schematics. So we're kind of in the early phases of this design. So this is kind of where we're starting with this after we've met with all those different groups, got to receive the different feedback from those groups, and we've talked about kind of where this museum and where this floor plan can go and how this building can be a very flexible and functional, usable space. And I want to back up just a minute too, because I think it's important to mention, through that kind of programming and talking about what parts of this building or what are some of the keys or what are some of the aspects of the design process that we thought were important. Big Bundy and myself and our wives had the opportunity to come to the host city event in September. And that was a wonderful event, very inspiring. General Patrick Brady was the keynote speaker at that. He was one of the recipients, and I think my wife recorded every bit of his talk. And I said, thank you. And I went back and listened to it and watched it because it was very inspiring. One of the quotes he said in that was, museums are probably the greatest tool we have to teach patriotism to our future generations. And that just stuck. I mean, it was powerful. And so I went back and said, I want to talk to him about this museum. And so working with the host city program, we were able to set up that meeting several weeks ago in Dallas. Dick Bundy and myself went and met with General Brady and the content officer of the new National Museum in Arlington, and also their public communications officer. And Don Pettigrew, founder of the host city program, and Tommy Moore also went to that meeting. It was a great meeting where we got to hear a lot from them, and it was really good to get that kind of feedback and input from those groups in this museum. So let me just kind of walk you through the plan here real quick. So the plan that's up on the screen, this is will be the kind of a covered front entry area here, and this will be kind of the main front entry as you will enter the facility. We're going to have a nice lobby space, entry space where you can come in and receive and kind of hear more about the museum and the experiences that you're going to get to see as you visit this facility. There it is. And then if you're going to we'll turn right and open into this big, large museum space. And I want you to notice the star. That was kind of an item that kind of inspires some conversation. Obviously, if you know the medals, Each of the medals represented with a star. And this is something we wanted to use as part of our design, but it shows up probably kind of big here in more in detail than it will in the real facility. But we're thinking that that's going to be something on the floor, maybe with different color flooring. It'll be kind of a subtle thing. Hopefully it's one of those kind of discovery things as you're in the building. It's something you discover and realize. It shows up big in plan, but in real life it'll be a discovery item. But this is about a 3,500 square foot gallery area that we have here. It would be very multifunctional, open, lots of different opportunities to do different types of exhibits throughout that facility. Down here on the bottom part of the plan, we've got a theater type space or honor gallery. This is kind of, again, with our design, we wanted to make everything have some flexibility and functionality. So this is kind of set up with the seating you see it there, where it could be like a seminar, or it could be an ongoing video where you would walk in and see maybe a reoccurring video that told you about the Medal of Honor or about the host city program. So that's a unique space. It's also a space that we could set up different traveling exhibits or something like that. There's also a small conference room here that would be great for small gatherings, whether that's a public meeting, whether that's the host city program having a board meeting, just a small group from the NCTC that wants to have another meeting space. That would be a great space too. The other space we talked about too was part of this is, again, the functionality, the multifunctional, flexible spaces. Was this large room where you see with the 12 tables and chairs there? We've got that, we're calling that kind of the special collections / multi-purpose room. This is a place where we can have maybe, again, a traveling exhibit. I love the synergy between the National Museum and the host city program. There's already been some conversations there about how they can share and do some things. That would give us an opportunity there. The other place, this gives us an opportunity to just have a large gathering, a large meeting, to have a meal, to have some kind of seminar or something like that. And it doesn't show up real well at the scale, and I apologize for that. But this wall in between the two spaces, we're thinking is that's going to be an operable glass partition, something that can be opened up, where you now have, you can open that space up and expand it out into the main gallery and have more tables and chairs, have more or a larger event space. And then to help serve that, we've got back here in the back corner, this would be a small catering kitchen or medium-sized catering kitchen that would allow food to be brought in to serve if you did a meal there. Even if we wanted, at some point the idea was if we could have the big host city program banquet in this facility, we could do that. We have a place to serve the meals from and work out of that area. Just a couple other spaces in here, and then I'll move on, is we've got some archive storage, and then a director's office, and then, of course, just the support spaces around that that will support that, restrooms and mechanical spaces like that. Any questions on the floor plan? Okay. Let's look here. This is site plan. So I want to kind of give you a reference with the floor plan before we look at the site. This is the site. So this is at the front, kind of the I guess the east corner of campus. So north is straight up. You see the intersection of California and Bonner there is on the right. You can see the little rectangle in there is the Hayes Residential Hall. Kind of give you a reference. So we think that this is a great location. This is a very prominent location on campus. And one of the things as we talk about with the design is it really can become kind of a lighthouse for NCTC. You know, we had the opportunity to add the new signage and the entry gate up front on California, that I think was a really kind of a good calling card or a marker to say, here's NCTC, and I know that's been well received. And we feel like this can even add to that and be a really exceptional, as I said, kind of prominent building or location that everybody's going to know where it's at, and it's on NCTC's campus. Just a couple of things I want to point out on this slide here is one of the things we talked about was with that new entry that comes in and it's kind of off the page. I apologize, I didn't want to get this too small, but it's bringing in entry point. We've got up here at the front a drop-off lane, and part of that design process is how's this building going to be used. We see it as an opportunity where seniors from local school districts are coming here to take a campus tour, where it's maybe elementary kids coming to do a field trip to the museum. So we've planned this where we can get 3 buses stacked across the front, make it easy for kids to be dropped off safely or students to drop off safely, because we see this building, again, being a great use for both programs and for NCTC. So we wanted to make sure that we had those kind of things covered. We've got an entry point here. This is the main entry. So if you remember on the floor plan, those main front doors are right here. So there's a nice big covered entry. We've got a flag plaza out here, which will be nice where we can do any kind of ceremonial things, different little events out there with a nice big plaza area. And then entering the building, you see the footprint. And then in the back, and I didn't mention too much on that floor plan, but we have this outdoor plaza space that we've been calling the Patriots Plaza. This is a space where we've got like an amphitheater type deal. We've got space outside for gathering. We see this as another educational space or an event space. And it's got doors that open and back into the interior of the building. So I think this could be a really neat space. And one of the things we've talked about with our design team is how we can take those students who've gone through the museum. It's a great place to take them outside, let them hook around a little bit, and then have a little Q&A of what they've learned. Or if it's students coming for NCTC, that you can have a place to talk to them about, what they can expect maybe as they go on the tour of campus. So a really nice outdoor space with lots of green. We also love that it does bring a lot of green to this corner. There's some unused parking out in that area. We think this is a great way to change a little bit of that, soften it, and bring a little life to that space down there. And then we just wanted to show a couple of images. So we've had the images we put together back in September for the event, and we wanted to just update those a little bit, provide some updated renderings of the facility. So this would be the front entry. This would be looking at from the south, from the parking lot as you enter up into the building. The main doors are up here in the kind of in the shadow back here. One of the things we did is bringing in different materials. We want sustainable materials that look good, that tie to the campus. Even in the blue metal panel that we had back in there is the same color as the ribbon of the metal. Just bringing in those little pieces, those little touches, I think really makes a big difference. And here's another image. This is one similar to what we had for the event. It was on the little table card, and the renderings are on the signs out there. Is a view from California Street. One of the things I want to point out here is this kind of angled wall here. This top part is called cow wall, and it's kind of a diffused light system where it allows in natural light, but it's not just clear glass. You have control over the amount of light that comes in. You can do that at different colors. And through our design process, our design team really got into this and thought, what are some ways that we can honor these men that are these recipients of the Medal of Honor? And one of the things we talked about that was we only know just this small little portion of their lives. We know their citation. We know what happened on probably what may some consider the worst day of their life, but the day that they had this heroic event. And we know that little sliver, and what we did with this is this kind of represents those other portions of their lives that we don't know. And that's one of the things that the Host City program wants to focus on. They want to tell the whole story of each of these men, from their childhood to the event to what they've done with the medal, how they used it for patriotism, and how they continue to use it for good. And so we kind of thought this was a great way to kind of bring that out in our design, to show, hey, we're going to kind of unveil a little bit of what we don't really get to see, the whole makeup of these individuals. And then this is kind of a cool last shot here, kind of a bird's eye view from the intersection that shows that plaza area in the back. And you can see on this back wall, now we've opened this up where we're going to have clear glass, which again, we hope as you go through the museum now, you have a clear picture of what these men have done for us in our country. Hope you have a better understanding of their kind of three pillars of courage, sacrifice, and patriotism. We hope we can teach that. It's kind of back to what General Brady said about, I feel like this is an amazing facility where we can teach future generations about patriotism. But with that, what I'm super excited about is I feel like this building is going to have equal, if not more, use from NCTC in the way you guys can use this building for educational purposes, for hosting events and different things like that. So we're really excited about it. I'd love to answer any questions you have. I will mention one thing because I know the question will come. We know that there's a budget, and we've been working with that. I'm not looking at even one individual. Through this process, we have been working doing our cost estimating. We actually, because we know that with today's environment and construction costs, that's ever changing. We reached out to some of our local contractors to talk with them a little bit about costs to see what they're hearing, those kind of boots on the ground. We did a detailed takeoff. I mean, every door, every square foot of glass and window, and we walked through that over the last week or so, and we feel like we were very pleased to look to see that we're in the ballpark for budget on where we want to be with this project. And so we're still going to continue to look at that as the design moves forward. We'll continue to reevaluate that, ever-changing, to see if we need to make adjustments as we go. But we want to be mindful of that, respectful of that, good stewards of the money that was given to us. And so we're excited about where we are in the process going forward.
So, Madam Chairman, just a couple of things. And if you have a question this evening, board members, the new technology requires you to hold down the button on your microphone to keep you from distance, so I'll go ahead and say that now. I just wanted to say thank you for Dawn and Amanda for being here this evening. Appreciate that so much. This is an exciting opportunity for our community. This focus of this facility is primarily in first the museum and the host city program. And so it's been a long time coming for Dawn. I know this has got to be a very, very sweet moment in a way to see where this program has grown through the years. I appreciate the intellectual capital as a result of this project in the sense that there is a story behind the architecture. There is a real story for students at a very young age to understand, be a part of, and that's why we are excited, because it's educating our young in sacrifice. And so we're very excited about that. I would let you know that later on when Dr. Miller provides you updates financially, you will see where we are drawing down the money from the state already for the project. And that was a $5 million funded project by the state of Texas, but it's coming through our appropriations in North Central Texas College. So you'll see that later on if you have questions about the finance and where that's located, that can be answered too in the financial report. But we really appreciate everyone involved. It's been a lot. The mayor, Tommy's been here in those meetings along with so many others. So I just wanted to make those few comments about this. It's the first time some of you have been complaints.
Anybody else have additional comments or questions? I just have storage. I know that seems to be something that sometimes gets overlooked, and it's so vital, especially if we're going to be sharing exhibits perhaps with the National Museum and back and forth. So just, we've got that covered. That's what I'm looking for, some kind of.
We have in there, Ms. Felser, we have a archive/storage room, and that'll be a controlled, secure room, so that we can keep things, some of these things that these families are donating to this museum are different places. Correct. So we do have that.
I actually wrote down the same thing on my bill, but I was thinking like for the banquet tables and things like that there's really not any place for any of those kind of things, especially if we have a couple of different types of tables or chairs.
Yes.
And now our microphones work without anything. That was exciting. Let me just say where we were focused on as we worked with the architects, and that was museum first, because the Medal of Honor host city already has space on campus accessible to them for long-term storage that we can still afford to provide for them. It's air condition controlled, it's things like that. We have been concerned about that all along, and yet we're also concerned with that bottom dollar and making sure the dollars are going into the museum side of things rather than the storage side. So that's been something we've all been concerned about. So even this week or last week, as I spoke with the team from USP, I said it may be that we had to move tables and chairs and grabs more often than we wish. It may be set up that way initially till the museum grows, where it just stays that way until we get more display, and then you can manipulate that. But you're right, there's never enough storage. But there is a capability too, and maybe you could speak to this, Steve. We do have a capability to have a phase 2, correct, where it could be even just simply storage later on if we have philanthropy come forward and says we want to provide some extra funds. There is a phase 2 capability off the back of that, behind that wall you see currently, that would be very, very accessible for storage or an expansion later on.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Any other questions for Steve and team?
What is the capacity?
Capacity, Mr. Anderson, it depends on the function, how we want to use it. So, you could probably easily put 400 or 500 people in this if you had some large event and you use the outdoor space, the meeting room, and the gallery space. So if you talk about the seating, if you just look at the multi-purpose room we have in there, that's got seating for 100 with those round tables and chairs. So if you did, rows or chairs, you could put, maybe 150, 200 people in that room. But if you opened it up and had people mingling, if you had some kind of, alumni reception for NCTC there, that you could have several hundred people in the facility, I think it gives you a lot of flexibility to do something like that.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it. It's beautiful. All right. I think the next item on our agenda would be the Corinth campus from the Huckabee Architects. Robbie?
We'll add one more thing. We've got plenty of baseball players that like to move things. We'll get that.
Okay.
With us tonight is Huckabee Architects, and we have Casey Stevens with us. He is here to share the master plan update for the Corinth campus. And as you know, we sold off part of our property. We had a master plan that included part of that property, building in that area. So it was time to update the master plan. Master plan is before you on the tables there. There's actually two of them, two separate ones. One is just where we're at today without purchasing any more property around. And then the other is a master plan that if we do want to purchase a cabinet shop, then it would incorporate that. So in case if you'd like to come forward.
Good evening, and thank you, Board and Wallace, for, I'm touching this right here, for letting us update you on some things that we've been kind of doing, say behind the scenes, but just, working with the 2015 and 2016 is about whenever we put together a previous, the current, I guess you'd say, master plan for Corinth campus. And in that time, we have really the first image that we have in front of you, page 1, is really kind of a representative of what we had previously, but updated to reflect some land swaps, some boundaries, some things that have changed over the course of the past few years. And also, in addition to that, added at the maintenance building, which is currently in the process as well. So, like I said, it's pretty much just reflected on the previous layout, but revised to be more current. To go over that real quick on what that reflects, you'll see over to the right we have those numbers, and really we kind of put those in an order of priority. We have kind of the phase master plan and then the priorities of the buildings that may go on there. And so what you're seeing on the current, we've got priority 1, future maintenance building. That's going forward. Priority 2, new maintenance entrance, elevator, and library additions. So that's the current. That would be the additions to the current building that exists today, and bring that to a little bit more usability. Priority 3, industrial tech building. 4, front student drop off. And so on. So the rest is just kind of pointing out the existing main building, the future student services building, health science, and drop-offs. You can also see over to the far left a future city road, NCTC Way. And that will be, as we move forward, kind of aligned with, kind of to show you that's going to align with the main entrance. That's kind of planned for that future. So whenever you drive up on that campus, you'll see that new elevator front entry. And that's a pretty quick kind of overview of where we are with that. Do you guys have any questions on the phase 1? So the next being phase 2, as you saw on the previous sheet, there is a potential of that land to the south to be purchased. And so this image is really representative of
what would that look like, and what is possible if we were to take that land in, and then also make that kind of work with the future plans, the future development of Bora Commons. And so working with the city of Corinth, as well as kind of what would that look like, because there is a lot of pedestrian connection, there is a lot of parking, there's a lot of different things that are developing around this campus that as it moves forward, they kind of want it to all grow cohesively as, you know, everyone has at least talked, right? So I think that's the main thought here is, what would this look like? These buildings don't necessarily relate to a purpose at this point. It's just showing where buildings can go, what that might look like, and then, like I said, correlation with some of those pedestrian paths and walkways and connection points. So going over, you have kind of the same main priorities that we have on phase one, but really, like I said, the main change here is we take in some of that parking. There would be, obviously, this parking discussion would be a major point to get into as we went further south. We would take in some of that lot, but it would provide you a lot more kind of a mall and a kind of a diagonal connection point. Looking at, you know, different things here, like I said, it was really laid out on more of what could happen, what could this be, and then trying to give some buildings access not only to the existing phase one to the north, but also kind of what do the buildings start to represent from the kind of what you see from the highway, what you see from the most visual points circulating around that campus. And so trying to build some of those taller buildings out to the southwest to give it a little bit more image. And then just to the south, very south of that, is representative of the city development, City Hall being number 11, the new kind of park area number 10, and then right around where number 9 is future commercial development that's going to tie into that. So we're just kind of working with what they had at this point. That's obviously probably going to revise and change, but I think the exercise, I guess you could say, was to see what this would be. And that's pretty much a quick update on that, on where we've been, but it's really just kind of forward thinking of what can we be involved with and work collaboratively with Corinth.
A couple of things, Madam Chairman, if I could. There are numbers of reasons that master planning is necessary. First, it is a part of your accreditation process, which is very, very important. Secondly, as the city is moving forward with their plans to develop a lot, they're stretching beyond even this side of the 35 corridor, and they're stretching to the other side. We felt the need to say, okay, if you were coming, or if we're going to talk about land acquisition later on, here's what that would look like, here's the most that we could get in that property. There is a lot of square footage in this and a lot of capability for that. So as was stated, and I appreciate your statement, this is at capacity. This is not necessarily what we even may say we need in the future, but it is what we could do with our properties. And I think that's going to be very contingent on the programs and instruction chooses, on the development of that city plan and its future, because it's very contingent on this, what the city actually is able to do. But I'll say we are working very, very well with city leadership. We appreciate their call to us. They're communicating with us effectively. I wish I could say that's always been the case, and it hasn't, but we're in a very good place with the city of Corinth, and so this is partly to show them here's what we're thinking as well. So I do know that the city's followed up recently, and they're looking at even acquisitions of other properties and some things that they're talking about with us as well. So the lines of communication are fluid, but so may the plan. And so this is a working document, to say the least. And so we appreciate Huckabee coming forward and working with us. They've been working with us on this campus for quite a few years. In fact, they've in the past worked with our Graham campus as well in planning and master planning that campus for future development. So, but we're opening to questions. But we also needed a master plan to show the city to put our maintenance building in. Right.
Questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much for the report. Appreciate it. All right, the next item on our agenda would be the reports from the Board of Regents committees. The first one would be the Finance Committee.
Yes, Finance met on January 26th. We discussed revenue bond financing for the Flower Mound facility. We had a presentation from Specialized Public Finance. We talked about the issuance of tuition revenue bonds to purchase our currently leased space in Flower Mound, and you'll hear more about that later on the agenda. We discussed the maintenance facility in Corinth. It was discussed to utilize some of the funds from last year's land sale for that project. We will again discuss that later in the agenda. We did our annual review of the investment policy. We're required to annually review the college's investment policy, and we don't propose any changes to that. We reviewed the financials that Dr. Miller will discuss.
Good. Thank you for the report. The next report was the Executive Committee, and we did meet on the 26th of January, and we reviewed the board agenda. We also discussed the upcoming work of the Commission on Community College Finance and some of the work groups that the chair has been appointed, where the chair has made appointments to those different committees. Also, the membership in one of our American Association for Community College, we discussed that renewal. And finally, we reviewed the current enrollment with a sneak peek of what that's looking like. And that's all from the Executive Committee. How about the Building Committee?
We didn't meet. We discussed obviously these master plans that we just got updated on from architects, so thank them. It looks like they've left. We also talked about funds specifically we'll be voting on the maintenance building in Corinth later today. We talked specifically about that. We also talked about the purchasing building here in Gainesville. If you go by, you'll see that they're making good headway now that all the materials have been received. We also got updated on the 24,000 square foot facility at Alliance. We signed a lease on as part of the grant that we received. And it's kind of beginning to work with the architect there. And the lease updated us on the building IT and infrastructure issues with some of the maintenance, some of the different things we're doing now.
Thank you for that report. All right, the next item on our agenda, number 5, would be the Chancellor's Administrative Report. Dr. Wallace.
Thank you. So several things to cover briefly this evening. First, I'd like to update you on the work of the Community and Technical College Advisory Council. I had the pleasure, it was a pleasure, it doesn't always sound like a pleasure, to chair the State Community and Technical Advisory Council this year. And as chair, that is the joint committee that makes recommendations to the Commissioner of Higher Education for the formula and appropriations for all the community colleges in the state, the Lamar systems, and the Texas State Technical College system. And so chairing that this year had a good team of our colleagues across the state, but from all of those entities. And I'm proud to say we're submitting for consideration to the Commissioner and to the legislature ultimately a 10.7% increase over last biennium's funding. That will be seen in a number of different ways we've recommended, and I can't go into a lot of details yet except to say that will hopefully pass with my meeting with the Commissioner this next week to verify his thoughts on that. But just excited to see that we came up with some new ideas, and those are public meetings, so anything I'm saying here you can actually reference. Any of the meetings are all broadcast. You can see those on the Coordinating Board website. One of the things I'm proud of probably most of all is that we're moving from the Consumer Price Index as a directive of inflation to the Higher Education Price Index. That sounds very minimal, but it's a major difference than what we've always used in the past, and that is more in alignment with our universities. The universities have always used a Higher Education Price Index to declare inflation on our expenses and on what we do in higher ed. That's not always the same as the consumer price index. And then we've also put some success point recommendations for dual credit. Dual credit is a growing population across the state, and there right now isn't any success points directly tied to earning credits for dual credit. And so we're recommending that after 15 hours of dual credit is given to a student or awarded to a student, that there be some success points connected to that. We've also recommended an increase to the dollars per success point and an increase to overall appropriation contact hour funding. And that equates to about 10.7 overall, which is about $196 million additional dollars for community colleges. The Texas state system did some similar things, cut back on their dual credit funding. They are funded 100% by the state. They're also in tuition and fees. They have no tax base. But they're also funded on a success and job placement metric. So that is, they don't get some success monies back unless students get jobs post-graduation. Then we also work with the colleges, what are called the state colleges. That's the Lamar system, if you're not familiar with them. Lamar has a community college-esque kind of setup and a university, but the Lamars get some funds for facilities and things that community colleges don't, because they're, again, different than tax base in the past. So proud of that work and look forward to presenting that to the commissioner. I'd like to give you another update on the actual, really on everyone's mind right now in community colleges in Texas, and that's the Commission on Community College Finance. I serve on the legislative committee for TAC and also as an officer of that committee, been really involved in looking at this. I really have to say how much we appreciate the commissioner. Commissioner Harrison Keller has been reaching out to a lot of us over the last few weeks, and I just want to publicly say I appreciate him calling me and asking what would this do, or what would these things, or what do you think about this work we're doing. And so I provided at your desks this evening an assigned work group chart that has the Texas Commission of Community College Finance on it. They are moving into a few months now of working in smaller groups. I don't know as of yet if they're going to publicly show those or not, because they're not a quorum, or if they're going to do those by video or not. But I did want to tell you they're breaking those into 3 categories: college operations, student supports, and workforce policy. Chancellor Steve Head is the Chancellor at Lone Star, will be leading the college operational committee, our work group. Brenda Hillier, who is our previous chair of TAG, will be leading the student supports conversation, and then workforce policy being led by 2 of our presidential colleagues. That's Mark Escamilla and Brenda Kays. One of the things they're looking at under college operations, I'm going to assume because that is what the legislation said they would look at, is operations that are about shared services. There's a lot of conversations of why are there 50 different, for example, learning management systems in the state of Texas. Why are there different, we use Genzabar, some use Colleagues, some use, some Banner. I mean, there's all sorts of different ones. There's questions about why we do that. The argument I would offer back, though, when we ask that question is why the universities use separate ones as well. I mean, there is some affinity for that, and it has worked with smaller colleges that have partnered, but that's what the college operation is going to be about. Student support is going to have a lot of different venues, I think, out of that group. I think you'll see a conversation about dual credit there. I think you'll also unintentionally, or perhaps intentionally, we may see a conversation of service areas there. And the notion is of the 254 counties in the state of Texas, can we verify that every student in Texas has equal access to higher ed? Probably not. And so if that's the conversation, we're comfortable. If the conversation goes in different directions, we'll be there to hear that. But I think the focus right now should be on access to everyone. And that would be my argument if I'm talking to them, is about how do we make sure that our rural communities are served just as equally as our urban. And then the workforce policy is all about workforce education, the drive from the state and the drive to the importance of CTE, non-credit, occupational skills awards, all of those things in combination, and driving the Texas economy back from post-COVID. So I'm looking forward to those subgroups. We will probably be invited, because some of us have already testified to the committee as a whole. I'm pretty sure we may see us asked to join some of these work group meetings, and so we'll be ready to do that if that happens. Also, there is a steering committee working on this from the state perspective that is joint memberships among a lot of folks. Our chairman, Ms. Metzler, is on that steering committee. I am on that steering committee, but you even have folks from Commit Texas, EDUCAUSE. I mean, there's a lot of groups on that just are thinking what's best for education in the state, and hopefully offering the commission insight as a very diversified group. So I appreciate your serving on that as our representative. We are really moving forward on Red River Promise. It is really exciting to see the work that's being done to that team. I'm so excited about the signing days and the big parades that are going on in our high school gyms. It's been phenomenal. We have a couple of ISDs that have 100% participation among their high school students. That's exciting, and we are growing that, and so kudos to the Red River Promise team and all of our communities. I would remind you, or be derelict if I didn't, derelict, because Debbie would hurt me if I don't remind you of the gala on March 11th. I will encourage you have invitations, but we encourage you, if you're able to attend, to let us know. We're excited about the March 11th gala. I'd like to formally notify the board of an intent on our behalf of the college. This intent will begin the processes this summer, but I do feel that if there's any negative concern or any kind of conversations that need to happen from the board, I want to notify you tonight that North Central Texas College is moving forward to begin the process of offering a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. We are very much, have in the past, been concerned about getting into baccalaureate education because the mission of the community college in its original state was associate degrees. However, we do not believe we can continue to be competitive in our market, nor provide the needs that our rural communities need for nursing staff without moving forward with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Now, that is a tedious and long process. It will take us a year or two to get that up and going. But what you will begin to see is post our final version of our SACS reaffirmation report, we will begin to look at some change and moving forward on what we need to do that. You will see us create a budget probably in next year's budget that is related to the BSN, because one of the things you'll need to do is hire someone that is the director of that quickly to create the curriculum and move us forward. But we're looking forward to that, and I'm open when I complete this report. If you have questions about that, I'd be glad to answer those, but I did feel we need to give you an early notice that we will be doing that. That does not usurp anyone's desire to go to a four-year university for their bachelor's degree. It is another opportunity for students that don't have the ability to attend. That will have to be by the legislation. It must be out of Gainesville as headquarters of that. So it will be out of the Leo and Mabel Scott Health Science Center here. But there may be and there will be opportunities for especially our rural students to access a fast-track BSN, especially if they're doing the RN to BSN bridge that this will insinuate. I would remind the board that traditionally there's no February meetings, so at this point we do not have a February meeting scheduled because it's so close between the end of January and then the next March. So the next March meeting is the 21st, so just a reminder of that. At your desk this evening is a TASB Update 42, which I know you will love to read at your pleasure, and they put you to sleep if you do, but they're highlighting those areas in which are major changes, and that's provided. And then we are continuing to advance our technology in the boardroom. We have gotten so many new, across the district, participants in our board meetings as a result of broadcasting, and it has been very healthy when we need to return to see action of the board, or if someone says, I'm interested in what the board did, we are able to show them that. Newspapers are able to make announcements based on that. So you'll continue to see, and we're completing that work this month, so by March we'll have a fully vetted new program with TVs, and you'll have that iPad, Mr. Green and Ms. Morris next to you in the future. So that's all I have, unless there's questions from any of you, and I appreciate your time.
Questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your report. The next item on our agenda is reports to the Board of Regents, and the first one is the college enrollment update by Mrs. Beal.
Thank you. So we wanted to let you know about the enrollment for the fall of 2021 and the spring of 2020. In the fall of 2021, we enrolled a total unduplicated headcount of 8,128. That is a 9.7% decrease from the fall of 2020. And in the spring of 2022, as of January 25th, we have enrolled a total unduplicated headcount of 7,057. These headcounts do include the 16-week, first 8-week, second 8-week, and the mini-mesters for each session. That spring headcount is a decrease of 8.86% from the spring of 2021. One thing that we wanted to let y'all know about is we have a conversion rate and a yield rate. And we have seen that they have both decreased at the same rate. Our conversion rate is when we take a student from an applicant to an accepted stage. And our yield rate is when we take the accepted student and make them enrolled. And we did notice in the spring that both of those are about 7 points lower than they normally have been for the past pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, which is telling us that there's a potential that the students aren't willing to commit. They've taken the first step, they've done the application, but then they just aren't going any further. Or they go further, and then they get there with their advisors, and it's just a little bit too scary for them to commit to the final, go into classes. We are going to do some surveys with our applicants and with our continuing students that maybe didn't enroll from the fall, to find out where are the holes, where are we losing you, what's going on, is it life that's keeping you from here, or is it us keeping you from here? So we are in the process of doing those things. Our summer enrollment for summer 22 is actually going to start tomorrow, so everybody's getting all geared up for that. And our fall 22 enrollment will start on April the 4th. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, thank you very much for your report. All right, the next item would be the financials by Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Y'all probably realize that if you remember when we met in December, it was early in the month, and at that particular meeting, we did not have time to present November financials. So tonight, you have in front of you both your November financials and December financials, and since it's the 31st, I'll start working on January tomorrow morning. There's really not a whole lot that I want to point out on these financials, but one thing I would ask you to do is please turn to the first page of the December. It's going to be about halfway through, but it's called Statement of Funds. And the reason I want you to look at this is I want to point out that the ending balance at the end of the year for board reserves was $15.3 million. And I want to point out that in the 3 years that I've been here, that is the largest amount that has been in that reserve account. Just over the past 12 months, we added $1.6 million from the land sale in Corinth, and we also added $1 million of our lost reserves that we have been able to submit to the federal government for reimbursement. So that has grown substantially over the past year. And so I want you to be able to look at that when one of the first action items comes up on the agenda, because we're going to be talking about potentially using part of those reserves in Corinth. And at the bottom of the page, as Dr. Wallace mentioned earlier, when we're calculating these figures now, we do have the appropriation for the Medal of Honor Museum there. It's just over $2.5 million, actually a little bit of interest over the past few months. But we're going to start receiving bills now that we're actually working on that, and it will come out of that amount there. And in September of this year, we'll receive the other half of the appropriation, which is another $2.5 million. That those two together should get us through that project. Are there any other questions regarding the financials?
And Dr. Miller, just for clarification, and especially in the public clarification, the $2.5 million for Medal of Honor is not reflected in the $15 million board reserves.
It is not, nor is it in the grand total of all funds.
Correct.
At the very bottom at $33 million. It's not.
I just wanted to clarify that it's its own entity there for the purposes of the museum.
And I would just like to take the opportunity, because we're looking at this, if you recall the audit results that we received last month, and when you look at these financials, the current financial status of the college is great. We really are in great financial shape, but at the same time, I'm cautious to tell people it is in that great shape to a great extent because of some of these federal funds we have been receiving. Those funds are probably going to be running out in the next few months. And so it's going to be very important as we move into the creation of next year's budget to make sure that our income and outflow is aligned, because that's a lot of inflow that's not going to be coming in anymore. And so we're being very cautious. It looks like we've got huge reserves. We're in great financial shape. That could disappear very quickly if we aren't very prudent in the way we budget and the way we allocate our funds over the next 12 months. So I just wanted to say that both to the board and to the public that may be listening.
And the 2.5 million is in the cash flow, right? It is in the
It would be probably.
I
think it is the cash flow report.
I believe it is in that. It was real awkward. We had it in one. I wanted to make sure one place we were able to acknowledge. In cash flow, this is basically our bank accounts, and that money is in one of our accounts. So yes, that's the intent is for it.
And if I could make a comment as a follow-up, Madam Chairman, to Dr. Miller's comment, I think it's very important what he's saying. It's very important that everyone understands this. In the land of community colleges in the state of Texas, there is a continuum that I would argue is ever flowing. If you remember and you studied in your history books, the slide or an abacus or whatever you might use, think of that rod and we slide along. For many of our colleges, including NCTC, that tips according to enrollment because tuition and fees is the only negotiating point we have. Where other colleges in the state, examples, Dallas, Tarrant, Collin, Brazosport for that matter, a much smaller college, have such large tax base and such large appropriation generations with that they can lose quarter of their student population and it not affect their bottom line as much. That's the problem with where we are. It's why this division on community college finance is occurring. There's not equities there. And so for NCTC, because we don't have a large tax base and because we try our very best to keep our tuition fees at a reasonable level, anytime there's a fluctuation in tuition generation or in enrollment, our slide rule goes to the left, and you begin to go, wow, there's a gap. So that's why we've been concerned, and I appreciate Dr. Miller telling us this. There's a concern that if you look on paper, we look very, very healthy, and we are. We are financially strong. We are financially solvable. There's nothing wrong with where we are, but that's because we're choosing to make budgetary constraints, not do certain projects as we get our enrollment back up. Does that make sense? Because there is such fluctuation of that, and that affects extra projects or extra IT or those things. Is where we do that.
And Mr. Brown, I'm going to contradict myself because as I look back, I have made the adjustment. The cash flow report and the statement of fund balances are identical. In previous month, I had it taken out of one and not the other, but I wanted to make sure to present a consistent picture. If you'll look at the bottom number on each of those pages for December, you'll see that 33,466,112. So it's both on the statement of funds and it's on the cash flow. That has the 2.5 removed from it.
And this conversation really goes back, folks, to what Ms. Beal presented, and that's yield and conversion rate. It's unprecedented times. Higher ed hardly knows how to recruit in COVID. It's just, every university, every community college is struggling to see. We saw 100,000 students stop out of community college this year in Texas alone. 100,000 that did not continue. And so I think it's going to rebound. I think there's going to be a bit of a dip because the federal monies are going away and students are going to have to acclimate to, oh my goodness, what happened to the extra funds we were awarded as students. But we'll get there. Our teams are working hard. We are in good position, and we'll make sure we budget accordingly. And that way we're not having to make any dramatic decisions in the middle of the year.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much for your report. All right, the next item is the consent agenda items, and there are only two, so is there anyone that would like to have those taken independently? Okay, so I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented. Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Do I have a second? A second by Erica. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand, saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, so the next item is our discussion and possible action items, and the first one is the consideration of approving the transfer of the discretionary board reserves to fund the Corinth campus maintenance building.
Okay, it's been mentioned a few times already. Our campus maintenance facility is currently located across the street from these facilities, and that's correct. We lease a portion of one unit, which is about 1,000 square feet. Now, that 1,000 square feet is what we try to use to stock our items that we use daily, some other equipment, some materials that we have, and it's mainly just for the current campus. But it doesn't hold a lot for any of the other campuses in Denton County, because the way we've got it set up is we have a maintenance supervisor that's really over all three campuses. We have maintenance things for each one. So we're trying to establish a way so we can build some kind of maintenance facility where we can have enough storage, have enough area to hold on our daily items that we need on an everyday basis, plus any of the other equipment that we have to run. So right now, we're paying about $16,000 annually for that lease. That includes the camera, but it does not include the insurance that we have to do. What we're asking for is the funds to construct a 5,400 square foot maintenance building. Included in that 5,400 square feet would be approximately 900 to 1,000 square feet that would be solely dedicated to our IT department, because they're in the same boat we are as far as storing their equipment. So we would have a portion of that building strictly used for IT. And it would be conditioned just for the IT equipment. And so that would be approximately 1,000 square feet. So anyway, we would like to ask the board for some funds to go ahead and get this building completed. Currently, we've got the architects working on some bidding documents and some design parts. We have not gone to the city yet, so it's kind of to get all of our construction documents ready. Anyway, as you can see, we've kind of broken down the estimated cost, and that's strictly an estimate. We're thinking somewhere in the $500,000 range. So I guess what we're really asking for is to that amount. And as it's already been mentioned, we did sell the property next to our campus, and that's where those funds would come from, out of that reserve. So we'd like to ask you to approve $550 million.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments? Okay. If not, then I would entertain a motion. If someone would like to make that.
We approve the transfer of discretionary board reserves to fund the Corinth campus maintenance building.
We have a motion by Mr. Hayden. We have a second. Second by Christy Morris. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye, raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the discussion of possible action regarding engagement of specialized finance as public finance as financial advisor to the college. Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Many of you may have been around over a decade ago when the college had started leasing a facility in Flower Mound for offering instructional classes down there. And about 10 years ago, we did enter a 20-year lease agreement on that facility. And also, part of that lease agreement was that midway through the lease, at the end of the 10th year, the college would have the option to purchase the facility. And as it's currently balanced, where the balances currently are, that's about $6.6 million for the facility. And we have run the numbers many times, and it makes financial sense for us to simply switch on our balance sheet this from a capital lease to an actual purchase facility with utilizing tuition revenue bonds. Our tuition revenue bonds will be totally paid off by March of this year. We paid off the CPA last year. The balance for rent will pay off in May of this year. So we will simply pick up a new revenue bond issue as that one gets paid off. And for the college, because we will be able to remove that capital lease, we figure that with interest rates where they are and looking at the financial situation, the issuance itself should save us at least $60,000 a year. The principal and interest will be lower than the lease payment was. But also on top of that, we have administrative fees because there was a third party involved in that property that helped us. We pay administrative fees twice a year. That amounts to almost another $60,000. So there's well over $100,000 of savings. We actually found out there may be some balances in some reserve accounts that may make the savings even greater. So we definitely think it's worth pursuing. We've been talking to the Finance Committee for a couple of months. And so what we would like to do is start that process. And we start the process by hiring a financial services team that will go out and help put this bond package together. And I reached out to Mr. Stephen Adams at Specialized Public Finance. He and I go back over a decade. We worked together at Glenn College. We worked together at Temple College. Mr. Adams has, I believe, 30 years of experience, I think, with these types of issuances. We were discussing when he helped the city of Bryan put together the Glenn campus back in the early 1990s. So he's very knowledgeable, and I'm very comfortable working with him. I'm going to ask Mr. Adams to please come forward and give a presentation about what the numbers currently look like and what our steps would be as we go through this process over the next 2 or 3 months.
Thank you, man. I'd like to introduce Paul Jason, who works with us on this, and also, do I get to work on that $500 million campus? So anyway, we handed this out. There's a different version in your board packet, but we're going to be going from this one tonight. After we went to the Finance Committee, they had a couple of changes, and we found out a couple of things. And so, as Van mentioned, all we're doing from a simplified perspective is selling tuition combined through revenue bonds and buying an asset. And the asset is an asset that you're currently leasing. And so, as Van mentioned, that original debt was issued by the New Hope Cultural Educational Facilities Finance Corporation, and there's a developer that owns it, operates, at least in theory, operates it and leases it to the college. And those bonds are callable in June of 2022. There is also a Denton campus, and those bonds become callable on June 15th, 2028. So perhaps in a few years, if interest rates stay low where they are, you'll also have the opportunity to purchase that facility. Going to the second page, what we've looked at so far is in doing this is selling debt that matches the term of your lease. So 10-year debt, 10-year term. So structuring with level debt payments, and the total savings is a little over $665,000. I think Van mentioned that's about $65,000 a year. The present value savings of that is $595,000 at the rates we ran these at. And so it's essentially the present value savings we're taking away about 9% of the debt that's owed and just wiping it out because of the interest rate savings. We do have some cushion in these numbers, and so we have 25 basis points of cushion, but as you probably are aware, the interest rates have been pretty volatile lately, so we hope that stands. Now, I think Van mentioned that you had a payment of existing revenue bonds that mature in a little later this year. Van already has the money of that, and we're going to pay those off before we close these, so we do not have to comply with those covenants. Those covenants require us to have a reserve fund funded, and we believe that we can sell this with 10-year term to banks, bid it out to banks, and that they may not require a reserve fund. We do not believe they will, for a couple of reasons. One, you've been around a long time, you're paying off your debt. Number two, and I know it's a bit transitory, but you have a lot of cash in your balance sheet right now that we'll be able to show you. And I think by and large, most people believe that the established community colleges are going to start increasing the enrollment. There's just too much demand for that product. It's too cost effective from a student perspective, and so I think if you read information put out by rating agencies and others, we all are very comfortable with this college in particular is going to continue to be successful as we work with it. Going on to page 3, this shows you the savings that Van was talking about. It's roughly $65,000 per year. Now, this does include all the expenses of this transaction. What it does not include are the savings associated with the lease going away and that third-party management of that lease. And nor does it include the savings that are currently at the trustee that come down to the district once that lease is paid off and must be used to reduce the principal amount of the refunding bonds. We believe that's around $140,000. So there's quite a bit of additional savings that's not reflected in this particular graph. So obviously this is obviously a very beneficial transaction to the college. Page 4 is the sources and uses of funds. We believe we can eliminate the $18,000 surety bond. We think our cost of issuance are high. In there we accounted for counsel for a bank. Many banks don't require counsel because we use a credible bond counsel firm. And these bonds, the refund bonds, are also approved by the Attorney General. So we probably have even some more savings in the cost of issuance that are not reflected in those numbers as well. The next page, we started out with the Finance Committee on the 26th. We are here tonight seeking this board's authorization to move forward with the transaction. And if we do that, what we'll be preparing in the meantime is a kind of a notice of sale, a bid form for banks. We typically go out to about 60 banks. We make sure that every local bank has opportunities to bid. And often we see a lot of benefit there. So we're going to make sure we talk to all those people. And then what we hope to do is come back at your March meeting And we hope to present the board with an offer to purchase your revenue bonds. If all goes well, if something happens with interest rates or the market or something related to the industry, in other words, if we have another COVID issue, we can't get there, we'll come back in March and tell you why we're not bringing you along. If all goes well, we will then we authorize that sale. Those bonds will then be approved by the Attorney General's office, and we will close on February 28th, and you own that facility. And the next page, the last page, is a graph of the historical interest rates for the municipal bond market, the 20-year bonds. You can see it had been going down until January of this year. You can see it creeping back up a bit, but an overall trend going down. And if you go back all the way to the 80s, this is really continued to go down over the years. My personal opinion, and I'm always wrong, I think we're going to settle down and have lower interest rates, particularly for high-quality credits with tax-exempt bonds. So that's my probably biased hope. But Madam Chairman, I'd be glad to answer the questions.
Any questions? If there are no questions, then we would need the action to engage with the specialized public finance as a financial advisor to the college. We need a motion for that. Okay, motion by we have a second by Mr. Henderson. Additional discussion. All those in favor signify by raising the right hand and saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Then we need to go to the next item, which is the consideration of action regarding the contract for bond counsel services.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is simply a follow-up to the action you just took. We hired a financial services firm, but also we need bond counsel to prepare all the documents as we move forward. And Mr. Robert Dransfield is who we plan to go through. Myself and Mr. Adams have a lot of experience using this gentleman. He's at the Rhodes Norton Fulbright firm in Dallas. And actually, the prior version of that firm was Fulbright and Jaworski, and that's the company that the college, or the company, the law firm that the college has typically used for bond counsel in many of the previous issues. So it would be essentially a continuation with the same firm that the college has used in the past. And we're just asking your approval for hiring Norton Rhodes Fulbright for bond counsel.
All right.
And I would say, as Mr. Adams said, the fees and charges for his services are built into that cost of issuance.
Okay.
That's in the cost of the bonds.
For the bond counsel.
Correct.
Okay, very good. All right. Do we have any questions, or I'll entertain a motion if there are none?
I move that we continue the engagement of Norton Rose and Fulbright.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Haney. Do we have a second? Second. By Ms. Sullivan. Okay, additional discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, so the next item on our agenda is executive session, and I do not believe we have.
No, ma'am, but I misspoke. I think earlier, I want to remind the board, your board meeting is the 28th of March. I think that's the 21st. I'm sorry. It's the 28th. So I was just looking forward to a week earlier. So just
Thanks for
clarification.
that clarification. Okay, so I think we do.
We adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. Second. Dylan, thank you very much for your attendance this evening.